Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Here are today's top stories. The UK's evacuation operation in Afghanistan enters its final hours. Nearly 14,000 people have been airlifted out, and now the military will leave.
We have to now start removing the 1,000 British forces. They have to get out as well.
Pressure is on the Foreign Office after documents identifying Afghan workers were found scattered on the floor at the abandoned British embassy in Kabul, potentially risking lives. Reports that NHS England may be making plans to offer all 12 to 15-year-olds the COVID-19 vaccine raise concerns that the risks could outweigh the benefits. The UK has entered the final hours of its Afghanistan evacuations. Nearly 14,000 people have been airlifted out, and the Defence Secretary says the Centre for Processing Evacuees is now closed. NTD's David English brings us this report.
Defence Secretary Ben Wallace confirms the UK has entered the final stage of its Afghanistan evacuations. Wallace says the main British processing centre for eligible Afghans is now closed.
We will process those people that we have brought with us, the 1,000 people approximately inside the airfield now, and we will seek a way to continue to find a few people in the crowds where we can, but overall the main processing has now closed, and we have a matter of hours.
Wallace says the UK has evacuated nearly 14,000 people. This includes 4,000 British passport holders and nearly 8,000 eligible Afghans and embassy staff. Between 100 and 150 UK nationals could be left in Afghanistan, with some of them staying willingly.
But as I've said repeatedly for really the last 2 weeks, the sad fact is not every single one will get out. We will make sure that we have our visa processing centres, or indeed our enhanced capabilities in around the region and those neighbouring countries, and people who can should make their way to that third country, and we will process them. How hard is that going to be for
The Defence Secretary tells Sky News there will be 8 or 9 evacuation flights on Friday. He says the UK then needs to start removing its forces. Officials say 90 people, including 13 US troops, were killed and more than 150 injured in a terrorist attack on Thursday. Wallace says the closer to the final withdrawal time, the greater the threat is.
I think in a generic form, the narrative is always going to be, as we leave, certain groups such as ISIS will want to stake a claim that they have driven out the US or the UK.
Despite the terrorist attack, desperate Afghans are still waiting outside Kabul airport to flee the Taliban.
Believe me, I think that explosion will happen in any second or minute. God is witness, but we have lots of challenges in our lives. That is why we take the risk to come here, and we overcome fear.
US President Biden vows to complete the evacuation of American citizens and others despite the danger. On Friday, the last evacuation flights of Sweden, Spain and Australia left Kabul. David English, NTD News.
The Foreign Office is under pressure after documents identifying Afghan workers were found scattered on the ground at the abandoned British embassy in Kabul, potentially putting people in danger. NTD's Joanna Conway has the details.
The UK has been evacuating Afghans who have worked for the British mission for fear of Taliban retaliation. But a Times reporter says when he toured the abandoned embassy premises, he found papers with Afghan staff members' personal details scattered on the ground. He says the documents include the name and address of a senior embassy staff member, the contact details for employees, and the addresses of people applying to be interpreters. The Times says it called the numbers list. It found that some of the staff members had already been evacuated to the UK, but others had been left behind. A Foreign Office spokesperson says, "We have worked tirelessly to secure the safety of those who worked for us, including getting 3 families to safety. During the drawdown of our embassy, every effort was made to destroy sensitive material." The security lapse has been widely criticised. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says it's not good enough, and that the Prime Minister will be asking some questions about how the papers were left unsecure. Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy says her counterpart Dominic Raab has serious questions to answer. Joanna Conway, NTD News.
Germany's evacuation mission came to an abrupt end after yesterday's terror attack. But about 300 of its citizens remain in Afghanistan. NTD's El Rhodes tells us more.
Germany said on Friday it believed that about 300 of its citizens remained in Afghanistan after the country ended its evacuation flights from Kabul. The mission came to an abrupt end on Thursday, 5 days ahead of schedule, after a terror attack near the airport.
This is a despicable attack in a very tense situation. And at this time, I am of course thinking about the victims and their relatives.
Afghan officials said at least 169 Afghans died, but a final count might take time. The US said 13 troops were killed in the attack, which was claimed by an offshoot of the ISIS terrorist group. The German military flew over 5,300 people out of Kabul, including more than 4,000 Afghans and some 500 Germans. The last plane of the Bundeswehr air bridge mission landed in Tashkent, Uzbekistan on Thursday evening. This 28-year-old student who lives in Germany managed to board the last plane from Kabul.
Unfortunately, there was no more assistance from the German Foreign Ministry. There was no more contact for the past week, so we realized we had to take things into our own hands and do it with the help of the Bundeswehr soldiers.
He said many had been camping out near the airport for days. A German army captain, who founded a support network for the army's Afghan employees, is critical of the Bundeswehr's failure to evacuate at least 50% of its local staff.
This is and was about human lives, people we wanted to take in, and where we failed to take them to safety as one of the world's richest nations.
Chancellor Angela Merkel said Germany will continue to help people who want to leave Afghanistan.
We will not forget those people who could not be rescued by the air bridge. Rather, we will do everything we can to enable their evacuation.
She said Germany is now negotiating with the Taliban to try and enable further evacuations via civilian means. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
Still in Germany, an activist and former Afghan mayor calls for the Taliban to start talks with her as she works to draw attention to the plight of women in Afghanistan. NTD's David English has the story.
Prominent Afghan women's rights activist and former mayor Zarifa Ghaffari on Wednesday expressed her pain after fleeing her country following the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban.
I can't explain it with words. And I am not sure my tears will be able to explain it. The fear, the feeling, and the pain that I have. And I had at the moment. It was always so hard, and it is still so hard.
She said the feeling was worse than the day she lost her father, who was killed last year. Ghaffari said the Taliban was responsible for his death. She fled to Germany via Turkey following a harrowing effort to reach the airport. In 2018, Ghaffari was appointed as the country's youngest mayor and one of the first female ones. And in 2020, the US State Department gave her an International Woman of Courage Award. Before a roundtable discussion on Thursday in the German city of Düsseldorf, she said she continues to draw attention to the plight of women in Afghanistan.
If they really want to govern Afghanistan, they are not able to govern without 50% of the population. Women were the biggest part of developments in Afghanistan.
And she appealed to the new leadership.
I call the leaders to please let's sit and talk. I'm taking the responsibility. I'm ready to talk to them wherever around the world they are ready and start negotiating on behalf of all Afghan women.
During their first press conference last week, the Taliban said women are allowed to work in areas permitted by Islamic law. During their rule 20 years ago, also guided by Islamic law, the Taliban stopped women from working and administered punishments, including public stoning. Girls were not allowed to go to school, and women had to wear all-enveloping burqas to go out. David English, NTD News.
reports that the NHS England may be making plans to offer all 12 to 15-year-olds the COVID-19 vaccine. It comes amid concerns that the risks of vaccinating children could outweigh the benefits. Here's NTD's Jane Well with more.
The UK has so far held back on vaccinating all 12 to 15-year-olds with the vaccine. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation says it's reviewing emerging data. However, reports say NHS England are making contingency plans to possibly offer vaccines to all children in this age group. The people we asked had varying views on the proposals, including within their family.
But surely having the vaccination is not going to do any harm. If anything, it's just going to improve their chances of not getting it later on. It's an insurance policy. So I think it's a wise thing to do.
Daughter feels that at the moment the vaccine was rolled out particularly quickly, so at the moment she's got concerns that she would like to see a little bit more testing before she has her children vaccinated against COVID. Her children are vaccinated against all the other things, measles, mumps, rubella, that sort of thing, but she just thinks at this moment in time she'd like to see a little bit more testing before she has them vaccinated against COVID.
I think if it's safe and if it's been tested, then why not expand the vaccinated population? I mean, if clinical studies and research has shown that it's okay, then I'm all for it.
Obviously, they are not going to be as affected by COVID as older people. So I think it's important that it's not forced on anybody who doesn't want to have it. But if they feel unsafe and they want to have it, then it's good that it's available to them.
I think long term it's necessary, but obviously the vaccination is still in its early stages, and with the different strains, there's always that question mark for adults like myself that have been vaccinated. But you want protection for your kids, but it just feels a little bit rushed still.
The risk of COVID-19 for children is so low, many people are worried that the potential side effects of the vaccine outweighs its benefits. There are concerns following reports of heart inflammation in younger people, particularly younger boys, after getting the vaccine. This is something that may be more likely to happen after getting the second dose. In the UK, all 16 to 17-year-olds have been offered one dose of the vaccine. At the moment, it's been extended to 12 to 15-year-olds who have certain health conditions or who live with adults who are more vulnerable to COVID-19. But there are questions of ethics surrounding this. Should children risk the side effects of the vaccine for the sake of adults? Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
In Italy, a US World War II veteran has been reunited with Italians he almost shot in 1944. It was only a heroic act by the children's mother that turned a tragedy into a happy ending. NTD's Costa Jimenez brings us this story.
For 7 decades, Martin Adler treasured a black and white photo. In it, he's a young American soldier with a broad smile. Next to him, 3 impeccably dressed Italian children. He is credited with saving them as the Nazis retreated in 1944. Actually, he almost killed them. Adler trained his machine gun on the wicker basket they hid in, thinking a German soldier was inside.
The mama, came out and stood right in front of my gun to stop me from shooting. She's put her stomach right against my gun, yelling, "Bambinis, Bambinis, Bambinis," pounding my chest.
Adler insists the spotlight should not be on him.
The mother, not me, the mother was a real hero. Can you imagine you standing yourself in front of a gun and screaming, "Children"? No.
This week, the 97-year-old veteran met the 3 siblings for the first time since the war. Now, in their 80s, they have grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. Giuliana Naldi, the youngest, remembers climbing out of the basket and seeing Adler.
I cried so much earlier on. Maybe after I cried, I opened up a little. But it was a great emotion. It is a great joy. I don't know what to say.
Adler's company stayed in the village for a while in 1944. He would visit the family and play with the children. The long-awaited reunion was made possible by social media.
Look at my smile. I smiled. I loved them. And I was happy. And I wanted to kick myself in the behind to stop myself from shooting. And I was happy about that I didn't shoot. These were kids. What do they know about war?
A happy ending to a story that could easily have been a tragedy. Cos Jimenez, NTD News.
Still to come, lithium is in high demand as it's used to make batteries for electric vehicles. But a mining giant's plan to create Europe's largest lithium mine in Serbia has met with opposition. That and more after the break. Balkan country Serbia sits on the world's 11th largest lithium reserves. A global mining giant plans to extract the metal, which is used to make electric vehicle batteries. But some locals oppose the plan. NTD's Trevor Piper brings us this report.
This is the Jadar River Valley in western Serbia. By 2025, global mining giant Rio Tinto plans to turn it into a waste dump for Europe's biggest lithium mine. Dairy farmer George Kapanovic says if the mine is opened, land where he grows food for his animals will be full of mining waste, known as tailings.
So, this is where I feed my cattle from, and I am asking the state, is this fit to be a tailings pond?
His house and land will be next to the mine. Rio Tinto will pay him compensation, but Kapanovic says he worries about the pollution, and no one wants to buy milk produced next to a mine. The Dean of Belgrade University's Faculty of Forestry says underground reserves of water will be polluted by dangerous metals.
Those landfills, several dozens of meters high, over 900 meters long and over 250 meters wide, if established, will be full of arsenic, nickel, cadmium, lead, and will represent a permanent source of extremely dangerous pollution, and in addition to groundwater, the surface water will also be jeopardized.
Rio Tinto also plans to put waste dumps in the Cornita Valley. An association opposing the project says this area is prone to flash flooding, such as in 2014 when a closed mine's tailings dam spilled toxic waste onto farming land. Rio Tinto says the project will create over 2,000 construction jobs and inject £170 million a year into the domestic supply chain.
We understand and appreciate the concerns. What is often said is that we will use some dirty technologies and will pollute the environment, which is not possible in today's world with the technology available. Today, projects are implemented with high standards that guarantee environmental protection throughout.
Rio Tinto says the mine is expected to produce 58,000 tonnes of refined battery-grade lithium carbonate per year. That would make it Europe's biggest lithium mine. The government says the mine will pay off for Serbia, and environmental concerns will not be overlooked.
Well, lithium is the 21st century metal, and it is rare that exploiting it does not pay off. The number one condition is the environmental protection. We are not saying this for the sake of it, we mean it.
Lithium is central to EU plans to secure a supply chain of battery materials as electric vehicle use increases. Serbia sits on the world's 11th largest lithium reserves. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
Hospital workers in Athens held a 5-hour strike on Thursday. This follows a government decision to make COVID-19 vaccines mandatory for all healthcare workers from the 1st of September. NTD's Cos Jimenez has the details.
About 300 hospital workers rallied outside the health ministry in Athens on Thursday. They protested against government measures to make COVID-19 vaccines mandatory for healthcare workers.
This is a measure that offers nothing beyond forcing us to lose 10,000 colleagues at public hospitals.
Healthcare workers who have not had a vaccine by September the 1st would be suspended from their jobs. The Public Hospital Workers Union says it supports the vaccines, but opposes making them mandatory.
We are resolute and will support our unvaccinated colleagues both on the streets and in the courts. They consist of a tiny number and have for the last 18 to 19 months been on the front lines, caring for patients in the COVID wards and have not ever gotten infected. And now they are being thrown out on the streets.
The government has made clear that the deadline will not be extended.
I'm here today because I want to support the constitutional right of every Greek citizen to say yes or no to vaccination. I personally am vaccinated, but I believe it is my colleagues' right to not get vaccinated if they don't want to.
The measures come as Greece hit a new daily record of infections on Tuesday.
For 8 months now, we have had vaccines available, and we have a choice that we did not have before, to live within the wall of immunity or remain outside of it.
Greece has been seeking to boost its vaccination drive with a series of incentives. Kos Temenes, NTD News.
A new study says the sun may be the cause of global warming and not greenhouse gases. It goes further, saying that the United Nations' recent climate report contains bias. NTD's Patrick Hayden speaks to one of the report's authors.
The sun and not CO2 or methane may be the main cause of global warming temperatures in recent decades. That's the conclusion of a new study which contradicts the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's stance on the matter. One of the authors of the report says the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, seems to be selective in citing scientific papers.
When our work agrees with their narrative, we get cited.
Connolly says his work is not always taken into consideration by the IPCC, yet some authors within the IPCC have validated his work by citing him independently.
When it disagrees with the narrative, they either don't cite us or they cite us in a way that makes it sound like they agree, that we agree with them.
The new study comes right off the heels of the IPCC's new report that claims that humans have caused unprecedented and irreversible change to climate. But Connolly's team of nearly 24 scientists around the world say that the sun may be the main factor in global warming. It also said that other studies did not adequately consider the role of solar energy in explaining increased temperatures. Connolly says his report was started by identifying which areas have scientific disagreement and investigating those areas. And that's different from the UN's approach.
The UN IPCC's approach is to try and form a scientific consensus. They're taking a different approach. They want to identify a common narrative that they can then say, this is what everybody agrees.
Economies around the world are investing trillions of dollars on green technology, driven by the UN's scientific consensus that climate change is predominantly human affected. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Britain is considering the reintroduction of an animal that has been extinct for more than 400 years back to the rivers and countryside of England. NTD's Trevor Piper brings us this report.
In the 16th century, the Eurasian beaver was widespread across Britain, but due to excessive hunting for fur, they became extinct and have been for 400 years. However, a decade ago, these dam-building rodents re-emerged, and the population has been slowly recovering around the UK. These beavers make their home in this Devon River in the south of England. Government advisor Natural England says beavers can help to balance the effects of unpredictable weather.
And beavers at both ends of that spectrum of dry and wet can help us cope by reducing the flood peaks that go down rivers after heavy rain, and also holding back water like this wonderful sponge we're standing in today. If it didn't rain for a long time, the river would still flow because of the work that the beavers are doing here.
As well as preventing floods and droughts, the dams create wetlands that are beneficial for the local environment and increase biodiversity. But not everyone agrees with the idea of reintroducing beavers.
Beavers in the right place can do amazing things. Beavers in the wrong place can cause damage, flooding farms, flooding property, taking out trees, flooding roads, and we've seen all that in this trial.
Nonetheless, Devon Wildlife Trust supports the plan and says that beavers restore balance.
Most of our rivers and watercourses in this country are very straight and very canalised. What beavers do is they bring that natural dynamism back. So they create dams and ponds and riffles, and all these are important habitats for other species. So in the work we've done here on this trail, we've seen insects increase, we've seen birds increase, we've seen the diversity of plants increase.
On Thursday, the Department for Environment began to evaluate whether beavers should be reintroduced across the UK. Their report is due to be published in early 2022 after 12 weeks of consultation. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
And finally, London Zoo has started its annual animal weigh-in. This is a massive task that takes over a week, with some animals a lot more difficult to get on the scales than others. NTD's Joanna Robson has the story.
The annual weigh-in at London Zoo has started. The zoo's animal operations manager says they need a good record of animal weights.
And also it helps us identify if anything's changed over the year. Maybe we've got a pregnancy that we weren't aware of, or we want to see that pregnancy is going well and it's healthy. So by measuring those weights, we have those comparisons.
The camel has put on 50 kilos since last year, now weighing in at 3/4 of a tonne. To measure a lion, you make it stand up and stretch with the help of meat in a basket.
And one thing, for example, is we can measure the paw prints of our tigers. We've trained them to be able to do that. So if we do that every year, we can see how big an animal gets as it ages. The conservationists can use that information when they're looking at tigers' paw prints, because they don't often see the tigers in the wild. So they see the prints and they can work out the likely age of the tigers that are out in the wild.
Penguins are measured as they line up for morning feed and walk over scales. To measure a tortoise is easy, but to measure squirrel monkeys, you need quick hands and even quicker eyes. Ryan says the zoo has over 20,000 animals, but they won't weigh all of them.
However, we do weigh most of our birds, most of our mammals, most of our reptiles and amphibians. So that is going to be quite a big task, and it takes about a week to make sure we get them all there.
Ryan says the data will be shared with zoos and conservation bodies worldwide. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.